to start right there. We do have people coming in periodically through the waiting room. But I want to say thank you very much for all of you in attendance. My name is Clinton Monchuk. I'm the Executive Director of Farm and Food Care Saskatchewan. And those of you who are not familiar with Farm and Food Care, we have 3 different provincial organizations, Prince Edward Island, Ontario, and in Saskatchewan. And really our collective vision is to make sure we're connecting consumers to truthful information about food and how it's grown. And those of you who have been on different of our events in the past, you'll see we don't really pick sides on food or anything like that. We want to make sure that consumers have full information about their food and how it's grown and allow you to make confident decisions in how you purchase or pick your food. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, feel free to go to farmfoodcare.org or canadianfoodfocus.org. Feel free to sign up for our newsletters, and it just keeps you up to date on what's happening within our organization. I'd also like to say a special thank you to our partners for this, the Agri-Competitiveness Program, which is under the Canadian Agriculture Partnership, as well as our great friends over at Canola Eat Well. So thank you very much for partnering with us. It definitely is a huge benefit for us to have partners like you. The intent really around these speaker series is to continue conversations about food, understand some of the different trends that exist out there. And in case you missed the prior sessions, we had Dr. David Hughes and Joanne MacArthur talking about different food-related topics. And if you missed that, you can go and take a look at that. They were recorded, and you can see that the information on how to get it is on your screen right now. With respect to today's presentation, just in terms of housekeeping, if you could just keep your videos off and your microphones mute, that would be much appreciated. We're going to have an opportunity to hear from you later on as well. And if you do have any questions, just put them in the chat section. And that part will be moderated by Kelly Daynard from Farm and Food Care Ontario. So with us today, we have Scott McDeivitte. He's really, I've had an opportunity to chat with him just before this, a very interesting individual who's had 35 years in the food service industry and hospitality. He's a successful restaurateur operating multiple locations. He's really gained an insight to the different functions and best management practices really across all the different segments of the hospitality industry. He was paramount in the creation and development of Gordon Food Services value-added programs and currently manages the consumer-facing marketing teams in the province of Ontario as well as the Atlantic provinces. He has a keen or a very extensive background in food service industry and a keen understanding of hospitality and consumer trends. Really, Scott brings a fresh eyes approach to a variety of different challenges that operators have to deal with. A consumer, operator, investor, and entrepreneurial mindset are combined to create dialogue and help support these individuals with practical solutions. So it's really great to have Scott on board today. Just a little bit of an outline of today's presentation. It's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be asking Scott some questions and we're going to get some answers from Scott to give us a little bit more information about the food service industry and the trends that are existing right now, especially after COVID. And then after that, Kelly will take your questions in the comment section. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much, Scott. I wish I had an applause-o-meter that I could play right now. I don't have it going, so I apologize for that. But maybe just to start us off, Scott, if you want to just take a few moments and explain a little bit about what you're doing with Gordon Food Services and who the main clients around your work is, and just give us a better understanding of that.
Yeah, sure, Clinton, and thanks for having us. I noticed there that I'm in the winter speaker series, so let's hope this truly is the last bit of winter. I was lamenting, which I'm not allowed to do since I'm from Ontario, about the snow we received this morning and where I live. So let's hope we're springboarding into a nice spring weather. Yeah, so Gordon Food Service is a family-owned operation that is in North America-wide. We have 9 distribution centers across Canada, coast to coast, and I think about 11 or 12 in the United States. We are a privately held company, which is very rare for a company of our size. So we have no shareholders and we're non-unionized. This allows us to act a little differently, and it kind of leads to some of the stuff that I'm able to get involved in, which is a little bit out of the box for a national food service distribution company. I've been around for 126 years and currently have, well, we're down, unfortunately. I'll get to it a little later about what the COVID effects were, but pre-COVID, we had about 20,000 employees, 6,000 of which work here in Canada, and have annual sales of around just under $20 billion. So large distributor. Our client base is anybody who sells food. So it's healthcare, it's hotels, it's independent restaurants, chain restaurants, camps, mining companies, hospitals, just about anybody who repurposes food. That's who we sell to, and we carry about 19,000 different products in our warehouse, and then own some specialty companies when it gets into our fresh produce and fresh meats and poultry, as well as equipment. So pretty vast. My department, we're pretty lucky. We're the foodies of the group. So we get to do some of the fun stuff. We supply value-added services primarily for our independent accounts that help them with cost control and help them stay current, stay up on trends, stay ahead of the curve when it comes to operational support. We have culinary centers in all of our DCs where customers come in and do menu ideation sessions, build new menus, new recipe concepts, as well as we manage a group of specialists. So with all of those sort of different categories I mentioned, with all those products, our sales folks can't be experts in all of them. So my team are the subject matter experts in areas like proteins, produce, dairy, and a number of other categories. So we support our customers and our sales reps with that specialist approach.
And we're going to get to some of that. I know you mentioned the protein side, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but I wanted to kind of get a picture of how this worked for yourself back, I guess we're a year and a month ago, back in March of 2020, when the initial stages of this crisis and the pandemic were happening. You know, what was the response from your team and some of the big shifts that you had to make? I know everybody had to change and adapt, but I know on the food side, it was a huge hit. And maybe you mentioned your sales. How much of a hit did you end up taking on that? Because a lot of your clients could no longer operate for a period of time.
Yeah, you know, Clinton, it was catastrophic. If you think from the tap running to being turned off almost overnight, and we lost 78% of our business. So we have warehouses full of food, full of inventory, full of product, a lot of it perishable, that we have nobody to sell it to. So it definitely was unprecedented in our industry, and not just for us, obviously for anybody in food service distribution, and really for our customer base. They weren't prepared. Most of our independent customers are just not prepared for this kind of thing. So it was a massive undertaking in the beginning, and what it led to was some quick decisions that had to be made that weren't always pleasant. The Gordon family did their best to keep as many people employed for as long as possible. So we used up vacation pay. We did what we could, but we had to get down to some key people to help right-size the business. And that meant for us about a 30% reduction in staff, which again, unprecedented. Never in our company's history have we ever gone backwards. We've always been in growth mode. So it was difficult. So with the people left, we had to regroup and sort of figure out the new landscape and find some alternative revenue streams.
So you had to make a lot of these changes right off the start and kind of work through that. What were some of the changes that you had to adapt to in terms of your demand over the season? And I know we hear a lot about you mentioned the protein and the vegetable side and in terms of some of the different brands that you guys have yourselves. But how did some of these shifts and these changes affect your ability to even get, say, beef or some of the dairy products? Because I know being an outsider and just listening into some of the challenges that existed on the, say, the dairy side or the beef side with some of the plant closures, it had to be difficult on the food service side too.
Yeah, the supply chain disruption has been extremely difficult and continues to be. But if I think back to the early days, we were like anybody. We were trying to find income and how we could augment this huge loss until our customers could adapt a little bit more to the takeout and curbside and really figure out what the new landscape looked like and how they would position their business. So we started doing things totally out of the box for us. As an example, we started a pop-up store at our Milton facility in Ontario, where when people were lining up for groceries and couldn't get access to it, we very quickly developed a website and an app where they could order directly from us, pay with their credit cards, prepay, and then come and safely pick up with a non-touch delivery. And we sort of thought, well, that'll be good for our little community. But because we were offering restaurant quality food, even though most of it was in larger pack sizes, we couldn't believe the response. And we got very quickly to selling $60,000, $70,000 a day just out of parking a truck in our parking lot and having customers come through. So that was a real sort of quick shift for us. So we started doing that at other DCs. We started loading up trucks and bringing it to off-site locations and then promoting it through social media, and people would come and buy food. Like, we don't sell to the general public normally. So that was a real shift. And then I'm not going to say as luck would have it, because it certainly wasn't lucky. We were in such growth mode in the Milton facility that we had outgrown our capacity to serve our customers well there. So we had built a new facility, and for those that are familiar with Ontario, it was in Ajax, just on the east side of Toronto. And it's a brand new state-of-the-art. It's got robotics, the whole 9 yards. And we opened that 3 weeks before COVID. So we had 300 startup employees. We were ready to go, and then boom, nothing. And that place was virtually mothballed. So we've had to find alternative ways to get revenue out of that building. And we've been able to shift some large accounts, multi-unit accounts into it. But something that's unique that happened even today is we have huge freezers in there, and some of them are very cold for ice cream storage or what have you. So we got a contract to be able to freeze the packaging that holds the COVID vaccines. So because they have to be transported, in these packs, these gel packs. So that we're a staging area for that now. So that is like totally outside the box thinking again, just to try to get some revenue. So we did that. But to your point on the supply chain, the vendors that we buy from, the manufacturers that we buy from, big and small, were facing a lot of the same issues we were. They had inventory that they had to move. They had perishable stock that was going bad. We were giving a tremendous amount of items to food banks, to people coming up to our door every day rather than throw it out, which would have been a real shame. So with that, they reduced their stock. So where we would normally have a wide array of products, that opportunity might have shrunk a little bit. So therefore, we had to shrink our offerings. So as an example, in the produce end of things, where when it's a non-growing season for us, and we have to bring our produce typically up from Salinas Valley in California through a co-op called Marcon that we're part of, they had shrunk their offerings too. So we had 50% less offerings in our produce category because we could not afford. It was so unpredictable, and we couldn't afford to throw stuff out, particularly having to bring it 3,000 miles to a DC or less for our Vancouver folks. So as a result of that, today we're still finding vendor fill rates. So when we buy product to redistribute, our vendor fill rates are now sort of in the low 90%, which sounds pretty good, but typically our vendor fill rate would be above 99%. And our fill rate to our customers, meaning on time as prescribed, is our standard is about 99.6 of all our deliveries. And that dropped into the high 80s at one time. And for distribution companies, that also was catastrophic. So we could not get what the customers needed. Customers don't understand, nor should they even really care. It's, we ordered it, we need it. But behind the scenes, so much of that was going on. And today, if we fast forward to the world we're in today, we're still experiencing that. There's been different rollouts of manufacturers and processors that have shut due to COVID and then reopened, but that's disrupted their supply line. There's a backlog of containers, that we might be buying stuff from offshore that's, stuck. Apparently there's some $8 to $10 billion worth of products sitting in outside the Suez Canal, just going bad because they can't get the stuff through. We had ports that were shut because of safety regulations and health regulations and COVID scares. So all of that combined has now put pressure on supply and of course pressure on price. I saw the canola there as one of the sponsors, and you look at that as an example of the cost of where canola oil's going, and we're trying to, we try to purchase well, but there's no crystal ball on things. So it's been extremely disruptive, but we're working through it.
Yeah, I can definitely fill you in on the canola markets because, it's such a shortage right now. And I even read a thing this morning indicating that Canada was going to actually have to import some canola just to fill the crusher's capacity because, even myself as a farmer, I'm completely sold out of canola right now because the prices were so good. So if I can just for a moment, just because we've been talking a little bit about some of your customers and some of the changes in demands from them. And I think we're seeing some consumption changes around quick service restaurants and full service restaurants. And how are some of their demands? Like you've built your model in the past based on kind of X% of these different restaurants, and now it's changed, right? So do you feel that change is going to continue as you go forward with these different demands from customers buying in those different restaurants? And do you feel that it's just going to promote some issues going forward in terms of procurement for some of those products?
Yeah, that's a big question. There's no doubt that the landscape has changed. We have put together a presentation called, we just call it Restaurant of the Future 2.0. And what that means in the eyes of both the consumer and the operator. Between 2015 and 2019, we saw about a 17% reduction in what we call independent food service operators, so your mom and pop style restaurants, and a shift towards chains. And not just a shift towards chains in full service restaurants, but a shift obviously in quick service restaurants and fast casual. What COVID has done is accelerated that even further. We're going to see, and this is unfortunate because I was an independent restaurateur, even though I had multiple locations, they were all just mine. And they're the lifeblood of our industry. They're the innovators. They're the ones where you get the, where we feel we have the real value, and they're the ones that involved in our communities. And so we're anticipating probably another almost 30% reduction in what that looks like. So to put that in perspective, and I can only recite the Ontario numbers off the top of my noggin, but let's say we've probably gone from 12,000 and we're anticipating we might have 9,200. So with that, the good ones have adapted. Lots of people have closed, but the good ones understood that we do have to change. So what you're seeing now is a trend towards smaller menus. So the menu size smaller means the inventory is a little bit easier to control, means your costs are a little easier to control, and you're not throwing as much food out. More of a movement towards what we call LTOs, so limited time offers, where this is particularly good when we're looking at the seasons when our different areas of our country are bountiful with crops. We always promote our customers to use local foods when they're plentiful, and make them the star of a limited time offer. So something like a fiddlehead that might not, that's got a really short lifespan, but man, when they're there, let's utilize them in our recipes. So a shift towards that, more conscious of that. Pack sizes, we've had to reduce some pack sizes again for inventory control. So rather than maybe a large box of chicken breast, it's maybe a split box in order to help that operator not be at risk for waste. And then deliveries, we're a logistics company. We deliver, all over the provinces, and often great distances from our DCs. And there's a cost in that, and a cost to the environment on it. So we like to go with full trucks, and we like to make it worthwhile. Well, we've had to adapt to smaller delivery styles, invest in smaller delivery vehicles, because not everybody can take the orders they used to take. So there's, from our standpoint, that's a real shift. And the other one would be retail. So we've been able to help a lot of our customers adapt to sort of have a retail presence within their bricks and mortar. So we've got retail ready packaging product now, which we never had in the past. So it might be something that if a restaurant buys a certain sausage office that they absolutely love and their customers absolutely love, and they want to offer it to their public, they can't offer a big box of sausages, right, with 400 in it. So we've been able to do more retail ready style packaging. And our vendors have been great at adapting to that when possible, and help them create a revenue stream through retail as well. And the last sort of really weird adaptation we're doing now is we're helping a lot of, particularly in the Atlantic provinces, a lot of customers through what we call Truckload Connect. And that is where they promote about 16 or 17 items that they might use in their restaurant. Typically it's proteins. And they put it on their social media, and we develop a portal for them. We're at the back of this. Nobody sees us. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares who we are. And our customers sell retail quality food in pack sizes that are good for their customers to buy. So their regulars might buy, the community might buy, they might do fundraising around it. And we show up, it's all done in advance. We show up on the day for a 2-hour window, and people come and pick up their product, and it's all prepaid for. This has been extremely well received, and it's a great revenue stream for independent restaurants. There's independents that can make $8,000 to $10,000 a day just on the profits of what they sold on those truckloads. And for the regular one who's got a 5% profit margin, you can imagine how many burgers they'd have to sell to make that kind of profit. Yeah. So lots of adaptation, to your point.
Yeah, and speaking of adaptation, and you mentioned that the SKUs, the menu items that you get when you order. I know some of our favorite restaurants here in Saskatoon, they would have maybe 10 or 11 different entrees that you could purchase, and they've kind of shrunk that down to about 6 to get back to your point around food waste. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you though, like, do you see, and are you trending towards the idea that the general public will get back to a point of consumption patterns that were similar in the past after we kind of get through this pandemic? Or do you feel that some of these shifts are now kind of ingrained in our being, and we're going to be more inclined to just say, you know what, I'm fine maybe making an extra meal or two at home, or order it as opposed to sit down? Do you see some of those changes that are going to be long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the consumer behavior, one thing that'll stick for sure is the amount of takeout. We were seeing this grow. It's called portability, and we were seeing this grow prior to COVID. Double digits for the last 4 or 5 years. We saw this trend, and we would talk to our customer base about, hey, you got to get the right containers. You've got to, if you need something that's eco-friendly, then here's what we advise. Let's check what your municipality allows to recycle. So there was already momentum with that. This has accelerated it by 10 years. So that will not change. That ability to consume off-premise restaurant food will certainly continue. What we have seen, if we look at some of our friends in the States that in areas that we sell to, where they're a little bit, well, not a little, where they're a lot more open in some places like Florida or Texas or Arizona, the the pent up demand for sociability is through the roof. There are people clamoring to go out, and there are waiting lines at restaurants that can't keep up with reservations. I'm not sure we'll see the same thing, but we're social beings. We want to be in a social atmosphere. It's interesting. If you look at information that we glean from Technomics or NPD or some of these data-driven companies that gather all this information, the number one reason people go out is not for a food experience necessarily, or not for something they can't make at home. The reason they go out is for a social activity. And that is the key driver. So I think that's ingrained in us. And I think if anything, we're anticipating that we're going to see even a greater demand. It's interesting. I'll put that in perspective, Clinton. When before we went through this latest lockdown that so many of us are experiencing yet again with wave number, whatever it is, we were almost back to 90% of our pre-COVID sales. And that was with restrictions in place. So there was, like, when the patio season was going last year, holy cow, like it was tremendous. It was so good to see. So yes, we're bullied on the fact that we think that there's going to be a good recovery.
So do you feel that, okay, and that's on the restaurant side. What about on the hotel side? And I know you guys do a lot of business on the hotel food service side. Are you anticipating that it's one thing to go out with a family member or a friend? Do you see the hotels getting back to large conferences and meeting places where they're going to have food and food services in their hotels?
Yeah, that will be a slower turnaround for sure, because of just exactly what you said. An intimate gathering or a gathering of friends or a birthday party at a restaurant is one thing, but to go to a conference with a couple of thousand people still might have a little hesitancy to it. Now, if I look at what we do, so we hold a food show. Every distribution center has a food show every year, and we have all of our vendors in, or most of our vendors in. We might have 600 or 700 vendors in, and we hold it in a big conference center, and we get thousands of people that come out for the day because they want to network, they want to attend breakout sessions, they want to get education, but they want to taste food. And they love going around to all the different vendors and booths, and we're hospitality, so we make it kind of fun. We usually, we are Canadian, so we usually have a bar, which certainly helps the festivities, and we get local craft beer and wine people in. We have some flair bartending stuff, and it's a lot of fun. So we've done now our second virtual one, and we do it because we want to stay relevant, but it is a third of the people who attend. And the feedback we get is, oh my, we cannot wait until we can go to our first Gordon Food Service food show again. So I think it depends on what you're offering, but certainly our customer base, of course, they are the hospitality people. They want to get out.
Yeah. Do you feel like it, in terms of some of those different demands that the restaurants and the food service kind of side of things is looking at into the future? Do you see trends that are out there around, say, sustainability or carbon footprint, and what that means and how that relates to the trust that the public is kind of putting back and the demands that they're making on what you source?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. There is no doubt that a consumer's demand will be around some food transparency. I know a lot of the folks on this call today work in that area of food knowledge and food integrity. And that is something that will be one of those lasting trends as well. It's not everybody. There's always those that don't really care, but the majority of folks that we're seeing, if I was running a restaurant today, I would make sure that my customer base, first of all, visibly saw all the safety protocols that I go through. Like I'd make a point of reinforcing that so that they feel safe and they feel I'm doing the right activity. And then I'd also be very transparent about how my food is sourced and where I get it from. I think that is, if you're able to sort of do that, and maybe it is something you can only do in an LTO. You can't offer all of your menu items because we can't do hyperlocal in Canada year round very well and still sustain a business. But certainly we want to tell the farmer's story. Like if we're if we're asked for a sustainable beef program, which we have, the Sustainable Beef Roundtable, we want to highlight the farmers at our food show, in our POS. We want to highlight those stories because those stories attach our customer's customer to the buying experience or the restaurant experience. So we definitely think that's super important, to the point where we have an online ordering system. Our sales reps can take your order, but most of our customers order through their portal, through their it's called Gordon ordering. It doesn't really matter, but that's how they order. So in order for them to be able to source product on that, we've established what's called clear choice attributes. So if they want to search for a product by an attribute, so say maybe it's Saskatchewan only grown, raised, slaughtered, whatever, they'll be able to identify that in their order guide. It'll come up as an identifier for that. If they're just concerned that it's a Canadian product, right? Because maybe it's ocean fish, then it'll come up as a Canadian product. If it's a sustainable product and we vetted through it, it'll come up that it's sustainable. So there's all these what we call clear choice, meaning that our consumers ordering online can make a clear choice to what they want to buy based on the attributes they're searching for. If obviously if it's a spice that we get from North Africa or something, that's what it is. And it might not fall under any of the clear choice attributes, but it's still a product that they'll seek because they can't get it anywhere else. So for folks like us to take an undertaking in the sort of the tech world to start to do that kind of activity, it tells you that it is what the consumer demands, because our customers want to shop that way too. And we think it's awesome. I mean, we have dedicated local desks at every distribution center that vet through our local items year round and then highlight them during our growing season. So again, if I use Ontario because that's the one I'm closest to, we've just released our local guide to our sales reps and our customers, and we have almost 900 products that fall under the Ontario Foodland description of what local is, which is a very strict description. Like, we don't try to cut corners on, well, we can call it local because it's got 25% of strawberries from Ontario in it. So, and then we're part of Feast On, which is an organization that certifies restaurants if they make certain amount of purchases. It's part of the Ontario Tourist Alliance. If they make a percentage of their purchases are local, we can audit that. So a customer can ask us, okay, look at our velocities and tell us what our percentage is of local purchases. And if it meets the Feast On requirement, they're certified members. So yeah, to do all of that as a broadline distributor that people see with big trucks on the road, it's because it's needed, and it's what the consumer wants.
And I was going to just follow up on that. So you talked about the local Foodland Ontario is obviously a localized in the province of Ontario. But do you see majority of your purchasers, when they say local, are they looking for the province that they're in, or is local Canadian, is local within 100 miles of the
yeah, well, that's that old 100-mile market thing, that just doesn't work. Right? I mean, if you're in Toronto and you want to eat from 100 miles of downtown, you're starved, because unless it's going in a greenhouse, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to eat.
It's tough to get a banana too.
It's tough to get a banana. So it's interesting you say that, because we do local in those three ways. We do local is regional within a province. So it's how far am I from Regina? It might be that region. Then we look at it provincially, which is probably the most accepted, and then we look at Canada. And those are the three areas that our customers will look at to make their decisions. And often it's driven by price. If it's a Canadian product that can come in at a little less expensive to them than maybe something that's more of a niche product that's grown hyperlocal, depending on their operation, they might be okay with Canadian. But it really depends on their brand and how they position themselves to their customer base. But yeah, it's interesting. The definition of, it's like the definition of eco-friendly. We talk to a lot of operators, particularly, kids camps and folks that don't have large budgets, but they want to be super eco-friendly. So we have all kinds of different packaging, and we've got stuff that'll melt in the sun, right? If it's made of sugarcane. And we start, okay, you want to be green, and then when the cost factor starts to come in, the shade of green changes a little bit until we get to a point, a happy medium where, okay, it's not a foam container, but it's this, because it can still meet your price point.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the local strategy to some effect. That's not the same, because a lot of local product comes in very reasonably priced, but it's still the same mentality. Price is still a key driver.
I have two more kind of questions and themes that I want to ask you, Scott, before we get to the questions in the audience. And I do want to just say, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat section. But the first one is, what is the biggest change the restaurant industry actually had to implement? Like, obviously there was, for a period of time, they had no clients, right? And they had to cut costs and be more competitive in this environment. Like, what was that biggest change that they had to make to be successful as they move forward?
Yeah, I'd say it's twofold. The first was getting extremely savvy on what the government was offering in assistance, and to really buckle down and make sure you tapped into that. And then the second is absolutely getting themselves immersed in off-premise purchasing. If they weren't prepared to do curbside and delivery, whether it be themselves or third party, and there was lots of scandals around the gouging on third party delivery was going on. If they weren't in that game, they weren't going to succeed. And that incorporated technology into the mix, where a lot of our restaurateurs might not be super tech savvy. They kind of had to become a little bit by upping their game on social media, by offering touchless payment, by maybe converting menus into barcodes, like allowing access in different ways than somebody phoning them up and taking an order. So the adaptation of embracing technology was huge in order to allow them to get into off-premise dining. And then just really being good community partners, reaching out and seeing, even in tough times. We have a customer I live up near Barrie, Ontario, and we have a banquet facility that two ladies run that absolutely was devastated. It's a large banquet facility. Nobody's doing anything. And they saw that a lot of their clients were charities or fundraisers for schools or sporting events or whatever it might be. So they went to them and said, look, what if we put food programs together that we could deliver to those people and do that as a way of fundraising, because you can't get them in for a gala event. Let's do a virtual galas event where we can. And they don't make a ton of money, but they kept their people employed. And they gave back to all of those communities and all those charities that were struggling to make any money. So I think that is the future of it, and also making something as experiential as possible. Trying to make it, whether it's some kind of a theme night you might have one time, whether it's a cool environment to eat in. When the last thing was on and we were opened up a bit, there was a customer of ours brought in a big a trailer with a huge big screen, like almost like a drive-in movie thing, and he put it at the end of his huge patio, and he showed all the playoff hockey games on it, right? Wow. And so just that kind of thing. But really, I harken back again to that food transparency piece. I think that's important. It's very difficult for an independent restaurateur to compete with the large chain restaurants when it comes to capital investments and how long they can survive. So as much as their disadvantages are numerous, one advantage they have that the chains don't have is an ability to be nimble. They can change their menu overnight. They don't have to go through a board meeting to do it. They can change their offers. They can change their service styles. They can change their uniforms. They can change the color of the dining room. So we encourage, be nimble and adapt to what their customers are really looking for. And you got a pretty good shot. And if you've made it this far, you're going to rock it whenever we open again.
So here is, and this is kind of my own personal question for the last one before we open it up and Kelly takes over. I love Chinese food buffets. I absolutely love them. I love taking my family to them. Do you ever see a time when we can actually get back to a buffet? It doesn't have to be Chinese food, but any buffet where you have multiple people and you're touching those spoons or ladles, whatever it is,
Yeah.
in that group setting.
Well, I do have a little, actually, that's interesting you asked that because I do have a little insight into that. And I'm not sure whether the Mandarin restaurants are outside of Ontario. I'm not sure how far afield they've gone, but they're a massive Chinese food buffet. They've got about 17 or 18 locations in Ontario. And I think the average sales for them are 5 million a store. Like they are uber busy, and basically their business was done. So talking to the owners recently about that, and what they sort of see is a reintegration of the buffet, but more like a move and pick style, where you go to, and somebody serves it to you, where you're not able to sort of food trough it down a little bit, that they control that, but still having the you know, a good variety of food, but you know, spacing a little bit and not the ability. So for them, it means more labor because they're going to have to have people serve you. They'll probably make the buffet lines a little smaller, so you better make sure they keep what you like. And but I think you will see, but they'll reinvent themselves a little bit. One thing that they'll be very quick at is they won't let you linger, and never taking a plate back up to a buffet. I know that sounds kind of weird, but they don't want any of that food that could possibly spill. So I know the Mandarin are very good at food safety, and they are almost a pest. They will empty those plates right off your table, you know, just because they don't want you going back up with it and you start fresh. So I do think, but this is going to be a slow one, and it's going to be a different kettle of fish.
It might be better for my own health too if some I have to wait a little bit before scurrying up to that line and getting some more too.
Well, you know, chicken balls are not Chinese, right? You know that.
But they're so good. They're so good.
So I'll tell you just quickly. My daughter and my son-in-law, my wife and I lived in Australia for a bit, and my daughter was over there for 6 years, and we went to visit her. Actually, went to her wedding 2 years ago, and we went to a little place called the Sushi Train, and it was one of the it wasn't, this was pre-COVID. It was one of the most inventive touch-free experience I've ever had. You literally sat, and the guys made sushi, and they put them on these little train like backs of carts, and the train went around the restaurant, and the cart had a number on it. You had it in front of you, and you could hit a number, and the train would stop in front of you, and the little plate would go boom, and would push the sushi out to you. And because it was all interactive and fresh, and they're making it, your guest check average is just going through the roof because you want to try this, you want to try that, and it was completely no servers, no touching of anything. That is one thing actually I would comment on, Clinton, is that that style of maybe less table service could be something we see as well, sort of that British, sort of Australian attitude towards where you go to get your food, go up to get it.
I am going to sign off now and let Kelly continue with, because we got a swack of questions here.
Okay.
Awesome. And there's just been somebody post in the comments that there is a sushi train in Banff, Scott.
Oh, really?
Next time you're out there. So hot tip here today.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we've got a whole bunch of questions and some shout outs to you too. So your idea of the pop-up grocery store got a bunch of comments on it. They said, what a smart idea to prevent food waste. The question is that pop-up still going, or was that short term?
No, we've actually incorporated as part of how we do business now. Yeah, and the truckloads as well. So for our customers, yeah, they're baked into our business now. It was a nice outcome from it.
So you see yourself doing that permanently moving forward, the shift to a little bit of consumer direct work?
Yep. Yes, I do.
Very cool. A question from Lynn, who is on our line today. She's a registered dietitian. She obviously, our D friends always talk about nutrition, and she's wondering, do you see nutrition as being a trend moving forward? Is that, yeah?
Yeah. That's a great question, because we also have dietitians on our staff at all of our distribution centers, and we do a lot of work obviously in healthcare. So we're pretty in tune with that. I think that it's really what the consumer's definition of nutrition comes down to. I mean, I was born in Ireland, and my father, bless his soul, passed away, but he thought a French fry was healthy because it was a potato, right? He thought a Caesar salad was healthy, but it has more fat than banana split. So I think that the food transparency piece and the source of where the food come from and the food integrity will be probably more important than the nutritional, and I say that guardedly, the nutritional factors. Caloric intake, when they instituted that, as you had to put the calories on menus if you had X amount of, that did not affect our obesity levels one iota, which was interesting. When people go out to eat, it tends to be a bit more of an indulgence than how they look at nutritions whenever they're shopping for their own groceries. It is there, it's top of mind, but I think more about the sourcing and the integrity of the food will probably trump the nutritional piece.
Awesome. Michael, who's on the line today, says, what criteria would you look at when you're procuring a value-added producer product to your inventory, like a local or niche product?
Yeah, a couple of things come into it, if I can speak for our procurement folks, which they hate it when I do that, but I'll do it anyway. When we're sourcing, so I'll take it local. When we're sourcing even a local purveyor, we have to make sure that if that purveyor signs up with us, that they're prepared for what might be volumes that they've never seen before. So I'll give an example of Cohen Farms in Ontario, who's a potato grower. Well, whenever we started with Cohen Farms, they were relatively small. And then they have great potatoes, and they were making a great branded French fry for us, and it just went crazy for them. So he had to expand and grow, and he was prepared to do that. So we look for supply. We want to make sure that if we list your product, we're not going to let customers down. And then we definitely look for a HACCP accreditation. We are a federally inspected building, not just provincially. So anybody who supplies to us, typically there's a few exceptions. Typically they need to be a federally inspected facility. So those are the two main criteria: food safety and the ability to meet the demands if necessary.
Super. And I don't know about everybody else on the call, but when I think of a company as large as you, I don't think of local. And I love that aspect to your story today. That's my big takeaway for sure.
Yeah, well, it's not unusual. It's and I don't blame customers. Why would they? We have big trucks that pull up the places, right? So but we procure more local product than anybody.
I think that's amazing. Question as to whether you get feedback from your customers about things that are hot topics in food, like GMOs, like crop protection, like animal care, those sorts of things.
Yeah, we sure do. And then that's sort of what I was mentioning, those clear choice attributes. That was a direct response to our customers looking for that transparency. They wanted to be able to understand the products they were buying, and that has trickled down to the consumers. There's no doubt. As much as I'm not a fan of folks like, and I apologize if people are, but of maybe A&W or McDonald's, even though they take a rather serendipitous route to get to what they're doing, they have promoted that sort of sustainable, grass-fed, local approach a little bit that has really helped to permeate the general consumer's mindset. So if McDonald's says that they've got a sustainable burger, they don't tell you that it's only on one burger, right? It's not all of their burgers. It's only available on a quarter pounder, but their messaging, and A&W have been particularly good at it, their messaging is not so much about the taste of the food necessarily as how it's sourced, how it's raised. I mean, I remember the A&W had one of our suppliers, Beretta Farms, had Nancy on like the commercial talking about the beef and stuff. So they've done a pretty good job of that, and it's sort of now it's into the general consumer's mindset for sure. All of those things.
Question from Diane, who's on the call today. So, I mean, big company, and it's sometimes quite far removed between you and the final end user of your product. But do you have a way of talking about messages like about added costs to local food versus imported?
Yeah, so because we have an army of salespeople that are, pretty much consultants in their own right on all of this stuff, we do a lot of training in advance around product and product origin and cost, because we're not the cheapest person. Why would somebody buy from us and not just go to Costco, right? Well, obviously the convenience of us making the delivery, but also the expertise that we bring to the mix. So we can sort of forecast prices a little bit, like not so much now in COVID, but we can sort of forecast when markets would go up. We can put product aside for customers under contract, like a golf course that does a lot of tournaments and staking. We can put that aside for them at a fixed cost and freeze it down so that they have it year long. We can do a lot of things that a retail outlet can't do. And part of that is educating our customers on some of the inherent costs of the flow food. Like canola is a great example, and Clinton talking about it there. Like our customers, a lot of them rely on that product, and we saw a jib of ours go almost double in price from us, and we have to pass that along. And boy, it's not an easy sell. So we have to tell those stories about what's going on in the industry. We create POS around it, we create guides around it. So we do our best, but there's still customers, and a lot of folks on this call know there's folks that just don't understand what it takes to get from farm to table.
Just like pressure treated lumber right now, right?
Oh, I know. I just had, thank goodness, I just had my deck finished, and the lattice was 3 times the price of what it was a week ago. So.
Exactly. Amber's wondering if you are still seeing an uptick in menu innovation at this juncture of the pandemic, or are people just kind of holding on?
Yeah, that's a great question. The innovation is part of what's going to make you succeed in the future. But I would say at this time, we were starting to see some real good innovation happen. I'd say right now, there's a fatigue from our independents that they really just want to get their doors open. They want to simplify things this year, and they want to go hard and try to get some cash flow. We will see, we see about 200 customers a year through our various culinary centers. So spread out across the country, I like 200 in each one. And that's just because there's only so many days in the year. Those visits are all about innovation. They're all about trends, different ingredients, different usage of product, multi-purpose use of product. So and we have an absolute waiting list of customers that want to come through. So when I see that, I see innovation.
Super, super. Grace is wondering what you see in terms of trends between buying like off-premise menu items or meal kit delivery post-COVID.
Yeah, I think the meal kit delivery, it's really made inroads. I don't honestly get it, and we have a couple that are our customers, so I'll careful what I say. But I guess if you're in a big urban center, I guess it's very convenient. It's tough for me. I'm a chef by trade, so I like to cook every night. Since I've been with GFS for 19 years, my wife hasn't cooked a meal. I do it all because she's not home, so I can say this. She's not a great cook, but also I really enjoy it, so I like to shop, and so I don't get that. But it's pretty well here to stay. And to put the delivery of food in perspective, we just saw numbers released around Uber Eats, and this is mind-boggling to me. Uber Eats is on course this year to book $1 billion in North America wide of food deliveries a week. So $52 billion is what their forecasted revenue is for delivered food this year in North America. So the investments that are going into those companies, that tells me that that's a trend that's probably here to stay.
That's phenomenal. Right?
And helping to fill that trend is the advent of ghost kitchens. So kitchens that are opening that have a nice slick sort of social media presence or web presence, but don't have any bricks or mortar. They're run out of an industrial unit kitchen somewhere, or those are popping up all over the place, and that will help fuel home delivery as well.
think I've got one last question here that we've got time for before we close it off today. How interconnected are your Canadian and US businesses? Does the Canadian team work at listing products and sourcing in Canada for the US, or does the US manage separately?
Yeah, it's on large vendors, or we call our prime vendors, which are more international people, like it might, whether it be something like a Kraft or McCain's or whoever, those are usually procured at a head office level for both Canada and the US. And then each province has its own folks that work that will look for products specific to their customer base. So for instance, in Quebec, it's a very different menu mix that might come from those people's expectations as it would be maybe from Winnipeg.
Right.
So you have to make sure you have enough flexibility, you know, for the customer in Florida and the customer in Boston. So I would say generally on the large purchases that, you know, whether I'm buying, you know, whatever it might be, a dish detergent that from one, it's going to be the same, but everything else is pretty much procurement is done through Canadian and American.
Super, super.
Yeah.
There's more questions here. I wish we had more time, but in the interest of wrapping up by 1 o'clock, I want to thank Scott. He is our, as Clinton said, our third speaker in this winter, hopefully soon spring speaker series. We're still looking for topics for the fall. We want to bring this program back. So first of all, my thanks to Scott. He spoke to a group of Farm and Food Care members of mine in January, and I think the whole membership was just dazzled at what they learned, and we thought it'd be worth bringing you back for this group. Thanks to Canola Eat Well, our friend Lynn Weaver's on the call today, and the Agri-Competitive Program for sponsoring this series. We'll be sending out an evaluation summary. So tell us what you think and tell us what you'd like to learn more of. And always go to farmfoodcare.org or canadianfoodfocus.org. Thanks for attending, folks. It's been fun hosting this winter spring session. Scott, thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, thank you very much, and keep up the good work, folks.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.